Welcome to the continuation of locomotion. So in the first video we discussed the skeletal system. In this video we're going to discuss muscles and joints. So what is a muscle? A muscle is simply a tissue which contracts to produce movement in parts of the body or the entire body. There are three types of muscles: cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, which are also called visceral muscles, and skeletal muscles, which are called striated muscles. So we're going to visit cardiac muscles because they are special muscles that makes up our hearts. So a cardiac muscle is found in the heart and has the following characteristics. So for it to be that special, these are the characteristics that gives it that makes it so special that it was used to be part of the heart, so that it helps the heart pump blood without stopping. First, it is myogenic, meaning that the stimulus for contraction originates from the muscle itself. So for it to contract and do its job, the stimulus doesn't come outside the muscle, it comes from the muscle itself. The term for that is myogenic. It does not get fatigued, meaning that it does not get tired. The muscles of your heart have been pumping blood since you were born. They don't get tired. Actually, even before you were born, when you were a fetus. The muscle cells are branched and interconnected to form a net-like structure. Also, the muscle cells die easily when deprived of oxygen and food or exposed to toxins. Therefore, they must be supplied with oxygen and food all the time, and also they shouldn't be exposed to toxins. Next, we take a look at skeletal muscles. So unlike smooth muscles and cardiac muscles, skeletal muscles are said to be voluntary muscles. Well, the cardiac and smooth muscles are said to be involuntary muscles. What does it mean to be a voluntary muscle and to be an involuntary muscle? So a voluntary muscle is a muscle whose contraction is consciously controlled by the brain. So what this means is, in a voluntary muscle, whatever contraction is going to occur, the brain controls that contraction consciously, meaning that you know that you have made a muscle to move. For example, the muscles of your hand, okay, when you want to punch someone, you choose to do that. That's why they contract, so that an action can be taken. Okay, so such muscles which the brain consciously controls the contraction are called voluntary. Well, the smooth muscles and the cardiac are said to be involuntary, and being involuntary means the contractions are not consciously controlled by the brain. For example, the beating of your heart. Your heart is always beating, but it's not like you choose if your heart should beat or not. Okay, so the muscles that makes up the beating of your heart are contracting without the brain consciously controlling that process. So skeletal muscles are also said to be in pairs known as antagonistic pairs or antagonistic muscles. So skeletal muscles exist in pairs, which are referred to as antagonistic muscles. An antagonistic muscle or antagonistic muscles are pairs of muscles which produce movement in opposite direction at the same joint. So skeletal muscles occur in a pair. So one muscle will make bones to move in this direction, another muscle will make the bone move in another direction. Okay, so when one muscle contracts, the bone moves in this direction. When the other muscle contracts, the bone moves in the opposite direction, because it's like their actions are contrasting. One makes the bone move this direction, the other one makes it to move in the opposite direction. The two muscles are called antagonistic. because of these two muscles have a tendency of one straightening a given pair of bones, the other one bending them. So there are special terms that we call a muscle that bends a joint, so to speak, and a muscle that makes the joint to straighten. So the muscle that causes bending of the joint when it contracts is called a flexor muscle, and the one that causes extending of the joint when it contracts is called the extender muscle. For example, on your hand, I don't know if you know where the bicep is, but I'll show you. But just above, between the shoulder and the elbow, there are two muscles, one on top and the other one on the bottom. So if you can just straighten your hand, when you straighten your hand, the muscle that makes your hand to straighten is the one I don't know, which is just coming from the armpit, so to speak. Yeah, so this muscle which comes from the armpit going to your elbow is the one that makes your arm straighten or to extend. So that muscle is called the extensor muscle. But when you want to bend your arm, so the muscle that controls that is the one on top of the arm, which is the flexor muscle. If you cannot picture what I'm trying to say, we're going to take a look at some pictures. So here is the situation. We have two muscles here. So these muscles, there are two. So these are antagonistic muscles, and they are a good example of antagonistic muscles. So this one is called the bicep, then the one here is called the tricep. Okay, so bicep and tricep are a good example of antagonistic muscles. So the way they behave is, if this contracts, this one is going to be in a relaxed mode. So if this one contracts, this one is going to be in the relaxed mode, and when it contracts, it causes the arm to bend. So this is called the flexor. Okay, so the opposite happens when you want to straighten your arm. So when you straighten your arm, the tricep will contract while the bicep will relax. Since the tricep, the contracting of the tricep causes this arm to straighten, this one is called the extensor. Okay, so these two actions produce the movement of the arm when you want to bend it and when you want to straighten it. Next, we take a look at a joint. So a joint is defined as a point where two or more bones meet. There are three main types of joints, namely fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. Okay, so let's start with fibrous joints, then we'll visit cartilaginous, then synovial. So what is a fibrous joint? These are joints where the bones are tightly held together by short and tough fibers. Because of these short and tough fibers that hold these bones tightly, they do not permit movement and are therefore called immovable joints. Okay, so because of these fibers that hold these bones tightly, there is no movement, therefore they are called immovable joints. Example are your skull, your head. It's not made of one bone, it's made of different small bones that are connected together. Okay, which are called cranium or sutures. Okay, so these bones, even though they have joints, but they don't move. They act as if it's just one firm skeleton. Okay, so this is a very good example of fibrous. Next, cartilaginous joints. So these are joints in which bones are held together by cartilages. Remember the cartilages. Okay, they are found at the end of bones and they allow slight movements. Okay, they only permit slight movement and are therefore said to be slightly movable joints. Example are the invertebral discs that hold the vertebrae together in the spine, as we discussed in the previous video. So your backbone, the vertebrae are held together by these intervertebral discs. So these intervertebral discs are a good example of cartilaginous joints. Lastly, we look at the synovial joints. So here we're going to spend a bit of time and we're going to conclude this video on synovial joints. So these are joints made of cavities containing a fluid called synovial fluid, and they allow movement in one or more planes. Okay, so these are movable joints because you can move, they allow movements in one or more planes. Because of this, they are called movable joints. So there are several types of synovial joints, so we're going to take a look at just two. So these two are what is called a ball and socket joints and what is called a hinge joint. A ball and socket joint and a hinge joint. So we're going to start with a ball and socket joint, then we'll move to a hinge joint. So we'll focus our attention on ball and socket joint and hinge joint. So what's a ball and socket joints? So these are synovial joints where one bone has a round head and another has a depression. The round head is called a ball and the depression is like a hole called a socket. So this ball fits into this hole. Okay, so because of this, they are called ball and socket joints. So these have got a special characteristics, and that is they allow movement in 3 planes. So what does it mean by planes? So I'll explain that maybe with the help of a diagram. So examples of a ball and socket joints are hip joint and shoulder joints. Then a hinge joint, on the other hand, is a synovial joint which allows movement in only one plane, usually through an angle of 180 degrees. So examples of these are elbow joint, knee joint, knuckle joint, and joints of the phalanges. Joints of the phalanges are joints of your fingers. Okay, if you look at your finger, most fingers, I think the middle finger has two joints. Okay, so these are called joints of the phalanges. Then the bottom joint that is near your knuckle are called knuckle joints. Okay, so elbow joint, knee joint, knuckle joint, and joints of the phalanges are hinge joints. So if we look at the skeleton here, the ball and socket joints are the shoulder joints here and the hip joints here. Okay, so these shoulder joints, you can do movements in 3 planes. Okay, in 3 planes, meaning that you can take this arm which is connected to your shoulder backwards and forwards. You can also take it this direction and this direction. Okay, you can also take it upwards and downwards. So 3 planes. Okay, then if you look at the hinge joints, this one, the elbow joint here, this one you can only move this arm to here, and you can come back to straighten your arm, making 180 degrees. So only this movement is possible, which is 180 degrees, and in only one plane. You cannot take your arm this side, you cannot take it forward or backwards. For you to do that, you need to move the entire hand. But if you want just to move this part of your hand, you can't. Okay, you can only move this part of your hand just to come to your to this upper bone here and to straighten. That's all. Okay, so that's the main difference between the ball and socket joint and the hinge joint. Hinge joint is just one plane at an angle of 180 degrees to be the maximum angle. Then a ball and socket, it can even go 360. I'm just trying mine, but most importantly, it can make movement in 3 planes. We finished this video with the study of the parts that make up a joint. So this is a bone, this is a bone, this is a bone. These are 3 bones are meeting at a joint. Here there is a muscle. So the muscle is connected to this bone using by the means of this structure here, the dark structure called the tendon. Okay, so a tendon is a structure that connects a muscle to a bone. So what it basically does is to translate muscle movement into bone movement. I mean muscle contraction. When the muscle contracts, it will make the bone behave in a certain way. Okay, That's what the tendon does. Okay, after the tendon we have another structure that connects this bone to this bone. Okay, so this is called a ligament. Okay, so a ligament just connects a bone to a bone. So wherever in your body a structure that connects a muscle to a bone is called a tendon, while a structure that connects a bone to a bone is called a ligament. Okay, other than that we have the cartilages. This is a cartilage here, we have a cartilage here, and the cartilage here. The role of a cartilage is to act as a shock absorber. Okay, when there is impact, when maybe two people's joints hit into each other, so they should that shock, that vibration has to be absorbed. That job is done by the cartilage. Okay, then after that we have the synovial fluid, which is this fluid here, which has nutrients, and of course make sure that the joint has all the nutrients needed, and also it also helps in making sure that here there is smooth movement, so it acts as a lubricant like oil, so that the bones are moving freely past each other. Then on this side we have the synovial membrane, which is the one responsible for secreting this synovial fluid. Then we have the joint capsule, which just covers the joint. So let's quickly go through what I've just said. So I've said there's a ligament which joins bone to bone and keeps the joint stable by preventing dislocation. Okay, so this ligament is strong and is made of what is called yellow elastin. Okay, then we also have tendons which join muscle to bone and translate muscle contraction into movement of the bone. This is made of collagen, a special protein called collagen. Okay, then we also have joint capsule, which encloses the joint membrane. We also have the synovial fluid, which supplies nutrient and acts as a lubricant that reduces friction. Then we have the synovial membrane, which secretes this synovial fluid. Then we have the cartilage, which reduces friction at ends of bones. Okay, so let's just quickly take a look at disorders of the joints, even though this is like we are done with this video. Just a quick walk through the disorders of the joints. So the first disorder of the joint is this, which is called the gout. So this is a condition characterized by formation of uric acid crystals at the joints. So this uric acid comes from proteins. Okay, so if you eat a lot of meat, this meat is going to end up forming amino acids that are going to end up forming uric acid and might get trapped on the joints, or might get formed on the joints. Okay, so at the end of the day, it leads to swelling and paining of joints. It can be controlled by reducing the intake of meat and meat products whose amino acids are easily converted to uric acids. The next disease is arthritis. So this is inflammation of joints characterized by painful and swollen joints. The inflammation initially affects the synovial membrane, but eventually causes damage to cartilages and bone, making movement difficult. So it reaches the cartilage and bone, is difficult for a person to move. The next one is called dislocation, which is just a condition where one or more bones move out of a place at a joint. Then there's also the TB of the bones, or tuberculosis of the bones, which is the formation of what is called tuberculosis in the bones due to infection by a bacterium called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Then the last one is bone marrow cancer, which is just the uncontrolled division of cells in the bone marrow, or the cancer in the bone marrow. So what are the importances of the skeleton? We have discussed a lot of things about skeleton, but what are the importances of the skeleton? So firstly, it supports the body and provides the framework for the body. So the first is support. Second, movement and locomotion. It helps an organism to move and also to do locomotion. It also protects delicate body parts. From the definition that we did on what a skeleton is, we talked about protection and supporting the body. It also produces blood cells, the red blood cells and the white blood cells. So some white blood cells are produced by the yellow bone marrow, well, red blood cells are produced by the red bone marrow. Also, transmission of sound. Remember what we discussed in coordination. Okay, there are those three bones from the eardrum to the oval window. So the transmission of sound from the eardrum to the oval window is because of these three bones that pass the vibration from one bone to another, which are collectively called the ossicles. Also, the rib cage contributes to breathing by moving upwards and outwards. The rib cage is part of the skeleton and it helps in inspiration and expiration. So a skeleton helps in inspiration and expiration. Well, this marks the end of locomotion. Hope you have enjoyed. Happy solving.